Welcome. Settle in now. You have chosen to drift into the past tonight, to a distant world of stone towers and silent waterways, a place where the jungle whispers through crumbling ruins. Let your breathing slow, your body grow heavy and still. Tonight we journey to the ancient Khmer Empire. Once, long ago, deep in the heart of Southeast Asia, there stood a city more vast and splendid than any in Europe of the time. Its name was Angkor, and its empire stretched across the forests and riverlands of modern-day Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. Great stone temples rose from the jungle, carved with intricate reliefs of gods and kings. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and blooming lotus. Elephants carried nobles along grand avenues, and rice farmers bent to their work beneath the unrelenting sun. Life in this world was beautiful, but also harsh. The land gave much, but demanded more. Floods and droughts shaped each season. The glory of the empire rested on the labor of many, and though the kings built in stone, the lives of their people were fleeting and fragile. Tonight, you will hear their stories, the rhythm of their days, the burdens they bore, the beauty they created. Let your mind wander now as we begin with the simplest of lives, that of a humble peasant beneath Angkor's shadow. Chapter 1, A Day in the Life of an Angkor Peasant. Imagine the soft gray light of dawn filtering through the mist. The dense forest canopy stirs gently as the first breeze of morning arrives. Birds begin their calls, low and melodic. Along the edges of flooded paddies, frogs croak in a steady rhythm. The scent of damp earth rises from the soaked ground. In a small wooden stilt house by the edge of a rice field, a peasant family stirs. Their world is one of ritual and routine, tied to the slow pulse of the seasons. The father rises first, his body lean and sun-darkened from years of labor. His wife moves quietly beside him, preparing a simple breakfast of rice porridge. Smoke curls upward from a clay stove. Children, still drowsy, awaken to the familiar sounds of the household. There is little time for leisure. The planting season has begun. Outside, the paddies shimmer in the morning light, their shallow waters reflecting the sky. The fields are both a gift and a trial. They feed the empire, but demand constant toil. The father shoulders a worn wooden yoke, buckets sloshing at each end, and heads to the irrigation ditches. The mother and older children follow with planting tools, their bare feet sinking into the cool mud. Work begins in silence, save for the occasional murmur of encouragement or instruction. Seedlings must be spaced just so. Weeds pulled before they choke the tender shoots. Water carefully diverted from nearby channels. All is done by hand, day after day, from first light to dusk. The sun climbs higher, its heat pressing down. Sweat beads on skin, clothes cling damply. There is no escape from the labor. By midday, a brief pause is taken beneath the sparse shade of a palm. The family eats simply cold rice and pickled vegetables, sometimes dried fish if fortune allows. The meal is modest, the conversation quiet. Hunger is constant here, an old companion. As afternoon light slants golden across the fields, work resumes. The rhythm of life in Angkor's countryside is measured by nature's clock. The farmers move with deliberate slowness, conserving strength for the long hours ahead. Their backs ache, hands blistered, feet raw from the muddy ground. Yet there's little choice. Taxes are owed to the temple and to the king. Rice must be gathered, not only for their own needs, but for the empire's endless hunger. Above them, unseen, the grand towers of Angkor Wat catch the fading sunlight, a distant symbol of glory that brings them neither comfort nor reprieve. The stone carvings tell stories of gods and kings, but not of the farmers who labor below. By early evening, the family returns home, weary. The sky deepens to violet, stars beginning to appear. Dinner is prepared with what little is at hand. The air cools, bringing relief from the day's heat. Yet the work of tomorrow looms. Tools must be cleaned, nets mended. The small tasks that maintain life in this fragile balance. Inside the simple home, the family gathers on woven mats. Conversation is soft, mostly of the weather, the crops, the health of neighbors. Little changes from day to day, year to year. Dreams of wealth or escape are rare and rarely spoken aloud. The rhythm of their lives is shaped by forces beyond their control. Nature, the state, the slow turning of the seasons. As night deepens, the forest hums with life. Insects chirr, frogs call. The family drifts into restless sleep, bodies sore from toil. Outside, the rice fields gleam faintly beneath the moonlight, a mirror to the vast, indifferent sky. In this world, each day is a constant struggle, shaped by hard earth and harder expectations. Yet within this life of labor, there is a certain steadiness, a quiet endurance passed from one generation to the next. And so the rhythm of their days continues. Beneath the towering shadows of Angkor's stone temples, the sun will rise again. And with it, the work begins anew. The cool stillness of night lingers only briefly. Before the first hint of dawn touches the treetops, the household stirs again. The soft crackle of the hearth comes to life. Water fetched from the nearby stream is warmed in earthen pots. This is the life of the peasant in the Khmer Empire, a life not of ambition or wealth, but of constant rhythm. Each sunrise brings its own demands. Beyond the village, the vast hydraulic network of the empire spreads like veins across the land. Dikes and canals, some ancient, some newly maintained by conscripted labor, carry the precious flow of water to the fields. The success of every harvest depends upon this delicate balance, a harmony between nature and human design. When the system fails, when drought lingers too long or floods arrive too soon, suffering follows. But there is little the farmer can do except work the land as best he can. By mid-morning, under a sun that grows steadily more intense, the family is back among the paddies. The father, experienced and strong, wades through waist-deep water, inspecting each plot. The mother and older children press on with planting, their movements slow but practiced. Nearby, the youngest watch over a tethered water buffalo, its great horns sweeping lazily as it flicks flies from its flanks. Throughout the day, neighbors pass along narrow dikes, carrying baskets of seed or tools. There is little privacy in this world. Lives are lived in the open, each family's fortunes visible to all. Word of sickness, injury, or a poor harvest travels swiftly. In such a tightly bound community, cooperation is essential. Festivals, weddings, and funerary rites offer moments of shared respite. But otherwise, the year passes in a ceaseless cycle of work and obligation. By afternoon, thunderheads gather on the distant horizon. The monsoon rains have yet to arrive in full, but the air grows heavy with moisture. The family works on, eyes scanning the sky, knowing that a sudden storm could undo a day's careful effort. Time becomes fluid here. The rhythm of their lives shaped not by clocks, but by clouds, by river levels, by the needs of the crops. As the sun sinks low, casting long shadows over the glistening paddies, the family's pace begins to ease. Shoulders sag beneath the weight of baskets. The fields are quiet save for the occasional rustle of reeds or the low call of a distant heron. Returning home, there is little energy left for chatter. The evening meal is simple. Warm rice, a few bitter greens foraged from the edges of the forest, and if fortune smiles, a bit of preserved fish. Conversation is muted, shaped by fatigue. Children drift into slumber, curled beside their parents on straw mats. Outside, the jungle breathes. Cicadas call in rhythmic waves. The distant croak of frogs echoes from the waterways. Stars emerge one by one, scattered across the velvet sky. For a time there's peace, yet beneath the surface lies an ever-present tension. Taxes will soon be collected by temple officials, the amount owed calculated not in fairness but in the interests of the elite. A poor harvest means debt, perhaps the loss of land or worse. The conscription of a son for corvée labor on the king's great projects. There is no justice here, only survival. Still, within these modest lives, there is resilience. Bonds of family and village endure. The rhythms of planting, tending, harvesting continue, season after season, generation after generation. The great stone towers of Angkor may rise and fall, kings may come and go, but the lives of these farmers remain, rooted deep in the earth. As the night deepens, the household finally rests. The air cools at last, carrying with it the scent of wet grass and wood smoke. The stars wheel slowly overhead. Tomorrow will bring another dawn, another day beneath the merciless sun, another cycle of labor and hope. And the rhythm of their lives, unchanged for centuries, will continue beneath the eternal gaze of Angkor's shadowed stones. Chapter 2, Segment 1. The Fall of Jayavarman City. Picture the city of Angkor at its height, a place of marvels. Wide stone causeways stretching across shimmering moats. Towering gates adorned with the serene faces of kings and gods. Temples rising from the jungle, their walls alive with carvings of battles, processions, and celestial dancers. The hum of 1,000 lives moving through narrow lanes. Merchants calling their wares, monks in saffron robes drifting between the shadows. Now imagine that world beginning to fray. Slowly, imperceptibly, at first like loosening in a tapestry. This is how the fall of Jayavarman City unfolded. Not with sudden violence, but with a long unraveling year after year, beneath the weight of forces no man could stop. In the early years of Jayavarman, the seventh reign, the empire had seemed unshakable. Victories over rival kingdoms had expanded its borders. The great temples of Angkor Thom and Nabayon rose in stone, their faces smiling serenely down upon the people. Roads and bridges stretched for miles, linking distant provinces to the heart of the realm. The king himself was revered as a god-king, his will carried out by a vast bureaucracy. But even as new monuments were built, cracks had begun to form beneath the surface. The land, so generous when the rains came as they should, had turned capricious. Years of erratic weather strained the ancient irrigation system. Canals silted up, reservoirs ran low. Without water, the rice harvest faltered. And when the harvest failed, famine followed. The people murmured, first in private, then more openly. Temple officials came to collect their due, but there was less to give. Debt mounted. Families sold land, or worse, their children, to survive. In the countryside, once busy villages grew quiet. Empty fields lay fallow, choked with weeds. At the same time, enemies circled. The rising power of Ayutthaya in what is now Thailand threatened the empire's western borders. Raiding parties struck with growing boldness, testing Angkor's defenses. The king's armies were stretched thin, called upon to defend distant provinces while unrest simmered at home. Inside the city, life continued, but the signs were plain to see. Grand processions grew smaller, the offerings at temple shrines more modest. The markets once filled with goods from across the empire now seemed sparse. Craftsmen and builders, once in constant demand, found work scarce. Some drifted away in search of better fortune. Even the mighty temples began to show their age. Carvings weathered by rain and wind, roofs sagging where timbers had rotted. The once pristine causeways broken roots. The jungle, always waiting at the city's edge, began to inch forward. Yet for many, denial was easier than acceptance. The priests performed their rituals, The king still ruled from his palace, and the people, bound by tradition and belief, clung to hope that the old ways would endure. But the rhythm of decline could not be halted. As famine deepened and conflict spread, more and more abandoned the city. Some fled to the forests, others to outlying regions beyond the king's reach. The once thriving heart of the empire began to hollow. And in the quiet that followed, the jungle whispered its claim. Vines crept along abandoned walls. Saplings rooted in the cracks of stone. Pools of stagnant water bred swarms of insects. The city that had once sung with life now echoed with the calls of birds and the rustle of leaves. Yet the stones endured. The great faces of the Bayon still smiled, serene and unknowable. The towers of Angkor Wat still rose against the sky, their spires catching the light of dawn. A city not destroyed, but slowly surrendered to time, its glory faded but never fully lost. As the years passed, those who remained in Angkor lived amidst fading grandeur. The vast stone avenues were no longer crowded with royal processions. The moats, once carefully maintained, now stood still and choked with lily. Along the edges of the great reservoirs, reeds and wildflowers spread unchecked. For the peasants and artisans who stayed behind, life grew harder with each season. The old balance between water and land had been lost. Without regular maintenance, canals crumbled and silted up. Monsoon rains that once fed the fields now often brought ruin, washing away fragile crops. In the dry years, the reservoirs ran low, the cracked earth gaping beneath the sun. The temples, though still magnificent, became quieter places. Fewer pilgrims made the journey to offer incense and prayers. The priesthood, deprived of wealth, struggled to maintain ancient rites. Here and there, shrines fell into neglect, their statues weathered and forgotten. The scent of burning resin lingered in empty halls, where once chants had echoed. Beyond the spiritual decline, the city's defenses faltered, garrisons dwindled. Soldiers went unpaid. The rival kingdom of Ayutthaya pressed harder, sending raiding parties deep into Khmer lands. Reports of border villages sacked and temples looted grew common. Refugees arrived at Angkor's gates with little but the clothes they wore, their stories grim and their faces hollow with hunger. Trade, once the lifeblood of the empire, had shifted elsewhere. New maritime routes, controlled by emerging coastal kingdoms, bypassed Angkor's markets. The merchants who once brought exotic goods and bright silks now took their wares to ports far from the fading capital. The coffers of the king ran low. What little remained was spent in a desperate attempt to maintain appearances, to preserve the illusion of power. Among the common people, resignation set in. They had lived their lives beneath the gaze of god-kings, believing in the eternal strength of the empire. But now, with each crumbling wall and each untended field, the truth became harder to ignore. Some left to seek safer lands. Others remained, bound by duty or unable to abandon ancestral homes. In the forest beyond the city, nature gathered strength. The jungle, long held at bay by human hands, crept inward. Roots pried apart stone. Fig trees sent thick tendrils over walls and rooftops. Monkeys and birds made their homes in the abandoned towers. Slowly, steadily, the wild reclaimed its ancient ground. Even the great Angkor Wat, the heart of the empire's spiritual life, could not escape. Though it remained a place of worship, its outer galleries grew dim with dust. The once vivid colors faded beneath layers of grime. Travelers from distant lands, few though they were, spoke of a once mighty capital now strangely silent, its streets hushed beneath the weight of its own past. And so, without a single great battle or fiery ruin, Jayavarman city fell. Not in a day, not even in a single generation, but through a long, slow unwinding of all that had been built. An empire of stone could not stand against the relentless tide of time, nature, and change. Yet, even in decline, Angkor's spirit endured. Its stones whispered of past glories. Its carved walls still held the stories of kings, warriors, and the everyday people whose lives had filled the city. And long after the empire's banners faded, the jungle kept its silent vigil, growing thicker each year around the remnants of a world that once was. Chapter 3: Hidden Chambers Beneath the Temples, beneath the grand towers and sweeping galleries of Angkor's temples, a quieter world lies concealed. It is a realm of shadowed corridors and hidden chambers where the air hangs heavy with the scent of stone and earth. For centuries, stories have passed from one generation to the next about these secret spaces. Even today, monks speak in hushed tones of passages not marked on any map, of rooms long sealed from the light of day. Angkor Wat itself, the most celebrated of the Khmer temples, is vast beyond imagining. Its 5 great towers rise above layered terraces, each level adorned with scenes of gods, kings, and battles. But beneath the grand processional ways and open courtyards, narrow stairwells lead downward, into chambers few outsiders have ever seen. Here, the temperature drops. The stone walls, rough and cool to the touch, absorb all sound. The flicker of a single torch casts long, wavering shadows. Many of these lower passages were never meant for public eyes. They served the needs of the temple's caretakers, storing precious ritual objects, sacred texts, and offerings to the gods. Some held statues of deities, hidden away during times of political upheaval. Others were simple storerooms, their contents lost to time. Over the centuries, some chambers collapsed, buried beneath shifting stones. Others remain intact, sealed by ancient masonry, their secrets undisturbed. The deeper one goes, the more the outside world seems to fade. The bustle of the temple courtyards above, the calls of birds in the jungle, the rustle of leaves, all disappear. What remains is the echo of one's own footsteps, the quiet drip of water from unseen cracks, the faint scent of old incense clinging to the stones. Local legend tells of a central crypt beneath Angkor Wat, a place where the ashes of kings were once interred, their spirits bound to the temple forever. No definitive proof has ever been found, but the tales persist, passed from elder monks to younger novices. The belief in sacred spaces hidden from the eyes of ordinary men runs deep in Khmer tradition. Beyond Angkor Wat, other temples guard their own secrets. The Bayon, with its countless carved faces, holds a maze of inner galleries and chambers. Preah Khan, once a royal monastery, is honeycombed with hidden rooms, some now little more than piles of stone, others remarkably intact. In the temple of Te Prom, where fig trees weave through crumbling walls, blocked passages hint at deeper mysteries. Why were these hidden spaces created? Some may have been designed for practical reasons, to protect valuable items or provide shelter in times of siege. Others likely served more spiritual purposes, places for solitary meditation, or for rituals requiring seclusion. In a culture where the boundary between the human and the divine was fluid, such spaces held profound meaning. Even today, modern archaeologists tread carefully when exploring these forgotten chambers. The risk of collapse is ever present. Narrow stairwells sag under the weight of centuries. Air grows thin in the deepest recesses. Some chambers, when opened, release a sudden rush of ancient air, stale and thick with the scent of time itself. For the monks who tend the temples, these spaces are treated with quiet reverence. They light incense at sealed doorways, offering prayers for the restless spirits said to linger there. To disturb these places is to risk angering forces beyond human understanding. Better, perhaps, to let them remain in shadow, their stories whispered but never fully revealed. In certain seasons, when the tourists have gone and the air hangs thick with moisture, the temples return to stillness. It is in these quiet hours that the hidden chambers seem to breathe again. The monks, whose daily lives are intertwined with these ancient spaces, speak of subtle shifts in the air, of faint murmurs in the stone, Whether these are tricks of sound or echoes of the past is left to the listener to decide. In Ta Prohm, where strangler figs and silk cotton trees entwine the ruins, some of the sealed doorways remain untouched. Deep cracks reveal hints of inner rooms filled with rubble or long-forgotten objects. In rainy months, water seeps through the stone, carving new paths into the earth below. What treasures or histories may lie buried remain a matter of quiet speculation. The Khmer builders understood the power of mystery. Their architecture did not simply serve the eye. It was meant to guide the spirit, to draw the devotee deeper into contemplation. Outer galleries dazzled with stories carved in stone, but as one moved inward, spaces narrowed. Light dimmed, the ceiling pressed lower. One's senses became attuned to the unseen. In these hidden chambers, the divide between the material world and the divine seemed thinner. Not all who entered such spaces did so willingly. During times of war, when enemies threatened, priests and nobles may have concealed themselves below. Some legends speak of entire families vanishing into the earth, their fates unknown. Skeletons discovered in collapsed corridors hint at these darker chapters, though official records are silent on the matter. In the modern era, a new generation of explorers continues the search. Equipped with ground-penetrating radar and careful excavation tools, archaeologists peel back layers of earth and stone. Each discovery adds a new fragment to the story of Angkor. Yet for every chamber revealed, many more remain undisturbed, their entrances hidden beneath centuries of growth. In a corner of Pria Khan, a forgotten doorway was recently uncovered. Beyond it lay a small, windowless room. The floor was littered with fragments of pottery and faint traces of gold leaf. At the center stood a simple stone pedestal, its surface worn smooth. No inscription explained its purpose. The room's silence spoke more powerfully than words. Such moments remind us that the Khmer builders left much unsaid. Their temples were not merely monuments to power, but living spaces for belief and ritual. The hidden chambers beneath their walls continued to guard those mysteries, offering only glimpses to those who seek them. As the night deepens, imagine yourself standing at the threshold of such a space. The stone cool beneath your hand, the scent of age and incense thick in the air. Before you, darkness stretches away, inviting, unsettling. You take a breath, steady and slow, and step forward. The story of the Khmer Empire lingers here, in these quiet depths beneath the temples, reading, watching, enduring. Chapter 4, A Royal Banquet in Angkor Thom. Imagine now the grand walled city of Angkor Thom in its prime. The stone gates stand tall, their massive faces carved with serene expressions. Wide avenues stretch into the heart of the city, where the Bayon Temple rises, its towers adorned with countless smiling visages. But tonight the temples lie quiet. All attention turns instead to the royal palace, where a great banquet is to be held. Torches flicker along colonnaded walkways, their flames casting shifting light upon richly woven banners. The air hums with quiet excitement. Courtiers in fine silks and golden jewelry glide across tiled courtyards, their voices low, measured. Servants move quickly, but silently, balancing trays of fragrant dishes, polished goblets, and delicate bowls. In the palace kitchens, the fires burn brightly, smoke curling into the night sky. Cooks and attendants labor with focused intensity. This is a night of rare splendor, and every detail must be flawless. At the heart of the palace, the great hall glows with the warm light of hundreds of oil lamps. Carved wooden columns rise to the ceiling, their surfaces gilded and painted with motifs of lotus, naga. The king himself, a living god in the eyes of his people, presides from a raised dais. Clad in intricately woven garments and adorned with jewels, he appears almost otherworldly. Around him, high-ranking nobles and dignitaries take their places, each acutely aware of their standing in the gaze of their sovereign. The feast begins with offerings to the spirits and ancestors. Bowls of rice, flowers, and incense are set before small shrines within the hall. Monks chant softly, their voices blending into a soothing, rhythmic hum. Only after these rites are complete does the first course appear. Dishes of remarkable variety and subtlety grace the tables. Steamed river fish wrapped in banana leaves, spiced with lemongrass and galangal. Tender morsels of roasted wild boar, glazed with palm sugar. Delicate rice noodles bathed in coconut broth. Platters of tropical fruits, mangosteen, rambutan, and jackfruit, offered as a sweet counterpoint to the savory fare. The scents of the feast mingle in the air, rich and inviting. Yet for all its beauty, this banquet is no simple celebration. It is a stage upon which power and intrigue play out beneath layers of formality. Every gesture, every word is weighed. A glance too long, a toast too bold, a comment overheard each carries meaning in this delicate dance. The king's favor is fickle, and fortunes rise or fall on the smallest of cues. Conversations flow with practiced ease. Discussions of court affairs, military campaigns, and religious devotion fill the hall, each topic chosen with care. Beneath the surface, rivalries simmer. Alliances are tested. Promises are made with smiles, threats veiled in polite phrases. The king watches all, his gaze calm but piercing. None forget who holds the true power here. Musicians play softly in the background. The gentle tones of xylophones, flutes, and stringed instruments weave through the hall, lending an air of tranquility. Dancers perform slow, graceful movements, their hands and arms flowing in patterns that tell ancient stories. The light catches the gold of their costumes, shimmering with each step. As the evening deepens, the atmosphere grows more subdued. Cups are refilled, voices soften. The weight of the day's duties gives way to a more reflective mood. Some linger in quiet conversation, while others withdraw to the palace gardens. Seeking the cool night air and the fragrance of blooming jasmine. Yet beneath the calm, the currents of power continue to flow. Every noble here knows the stakes. The favor of the king, the preservation of one's family, the delicate balance of alliances all hinge upon such moments. And so they move with caution and grace, ever aware of the eyes upon them. Outside the palace walls, the city of Ankortom slumbers. The great causeways stretch empty beneath the stars. In the quiet homes of the common folk, oil lamps flicker and fade. But within the palace, the banquet lingers on, a reflection of a world where beauty and burden are forever entwined. As the banquet draws on, the night air grows heavier, humid and thick with the scent of lotus, sandalwood, and burnt oil. Courtiers remain seated in carefully maintained postures, though the long hours of formality weigh on their shoulders. They steal glances at one another, measuring who grows tired, who still holds the king's attention, who seems favored, and who has been left in silence. Servants glide silently between guests, refilling cups with fermented rice wine and replenishing dishes. The flavors become bolder now cured meats with chili, thick stews with tamarind and holy basil, desserts of sticky rice wrapped in banana leaf and soaked in sweet coconut milk. It is not merely food, but a performance, a rhythm. Each course arrives with timing as deliberate as the dances performed nearby. The dancers return, moving in slow procession across the polished stone floor. Their expressions are serene, movements exact. Their hands trace stories known to every watcher in the room myths of great kings. Trials of lovers, the dance of the rain goddess. But even as their beauty draws the gaze of many, The undercurrent of politics never fades. The queen is absent this night, citing illness or devotion, depending on which courtier one believes. In her place, a favored concubine sits closer to the king than custom once allowed. She wears no crown, but the weight of her presence is felt by all. Some smile at her with cautious politeness. Others look through her as if she were a shadow on the wall. Yet none speak her name too loudly. The king's advisors speak in turns, careful not to dominate the room. One shares the news from distant provinces, a small skirmish near the western border, a successful rice harvest in the south. Another brings a map etched on palm leaf scroll, illustrating new trade routes along the Mekong. The king nods occasionally, offering few words but listening intently. His silence holds more weight than any decree. From time to time, his gaze drifts across the hall. A young noble bows slightly, each time their eyes meet. A general sits rigid, expression unreadable. Near the back, a priest from a distant temple offers a blessing between courses, quoting ancient verses meant to honor the divine harmony of the realm. The guests respond in unison, hands pressed together, heads slightly bowed. The room falls still, even the dancers pausing. Outside the palace, drums sound faintly in the distance. A ritual procession passes through the street bearers walking in slow rhythm, accompanied by monks chanting prayers for rain. The timing is no accident. The king's astrologers have chosen this evening carefully, marking the midpoint between seasons. The rain must come soon, or the next harvest will fail. Inside the palace, the feast is a symbol of abundance, but everyone knows what is at stake if the sky remains dry. Eventually, the king rises. The room falls silent. He speaks briefly, thanking his court, offering a blessing upon the land. His words are measured, ceremonial, spoken in the old language of kings. A servant strikes a chime, its tone long and clear. The banquet is ended. The guests rise in practiced order. Some linger near the exits, exchanging quiet words. A few slip away into darker corners of the palace to speak in secrecy. Others walk alone beneath the colonnades, their footsteps echoing between stone pillars. For many, the night has only begun. By morning, the servants will have cleared the tables, swept the floors, and stowed the cushions. The dancers will rest. The musicians will tune their instruments anew. The courtiers will prepare again, dressing in fresh silks, rehearsing polite greetings, planning the next evening's conversation. But something has shifted. A glance was exchanged, a favor given, a position lost. The banquet has ended, but the game continues. And high above it all, in the carved towers of the Bayon, the stone faces smile in their eternal silence, bearing witness to yet another night beneath the weight of a god king's rule. Chapter 5. The Stone Carvers of Angkor Wat. Before the first rays of morning light touched the soaring towers of Angkor Wat, the stone carvers were already at work. Along scaffolds of bamboo and rattan, they moved with quiet purpose, their chisels and mallets in hand. The cool air of dawn would not last long, and by midday the sun would bake the stone, heating it until it could burn the skin. So they worked early, when their tools still bit true. Most of these men were born to the craft. Fathers taught sons, uncles guided nephews, each generation passing down the ancient knowledge of stone. It was no simple trade. The sandstone quarried from distant mountains had to be cut, transported, and carefully dressed before it could be shaped. Each block carried not only physical weight, but the expectations of the empire itself. To carve was to serve the king and the gods alike. The carvers worked in teams. Masters outlined the great panels, their sketches traced in charcoal or red ochre. Apprentices prepared the surfaces, smoothing away imperfections with sandstone blocks. Then the true work began. Inch by inch, Figures emerged, celestial dancers with delicate hands, warriors locked in eternal combat, the many armed gods presiding over all. Every gesture mattered. A single misplaced line could mar the harmony of a scene. The masters taught patience above all else. Rushing was folly. The stone would resist, or worse, fracture. Better to move slowly, to let the image reveal itself in its own time. For the carvers, life followed a rhythm not so different from that of the farmers in the fields. Long hours under the sun, broken only by brief pauses for water or a simple meal. Their hands grew calloused, their backs stooped with years of toil. The finer details, slender fingers, flowing garments, serene expressions demanded stillness and steady breath. Some carvers whispered prayers as they worked, seeking the blessing of Vishwakarman, the divine architect. There was pride in the craft, though few of their names would be remembered. The king's name would echo through the ages. The great temple would draw pilgrims from distant lands, but the carvers remained shadows behind the stone. Yet they knew their place in the grand design. Each chisel mark, each polished curve was a testament to their skill and devotion. At times, royal architects would visit the site, inspecting progress with keen eyes. Their approval meant continued work, more food for the family. Their disapproval could mean dismissal, or worse, conscription to other labor. The pressure was constant, but so was the unspoken bond between the carvers. They worked together, shared meals, and guarded each other's secrets. The camaraderie of stone was deep and enduring. The sounds of their labor filled the air-sharp taps of mallet on chisel, the soft scrape of stone on stone, the murmur of quiet conversation. Birds called from the nearby forest. Monks chanted in the distance. Above all rose the towers of Angkor Wat, their outlines shifting with the sun, a constant reminder of the work's sacred purpose. As the day wore on, the heat grew fierce. The scaffolds radiated warmth, the stone itself hot to the touch. Sweat beaded on every brow. Yet still the carvers worked, driven by duty and by the unspoken understanding that their art would outlast them. The gods watched, and the king's eyes, though unseen, were always present. By sunset, the tools were set aside. The day's progress examined in the slanting light. A figure completed, a frieze nearing perfection. The carvers descended from their platforms, muscles aching, eyes weary. Yet even in fatigue, there was a quiet satisfaction. Another day's work done. Another piece of eternity shaped by human hands. Evening brought a different rhythm. The air cooled as the sun sank beyond the treetops. In the camps near the temple grounds, the stone carvers gathered around small fires. Meals were simple steamed rice, a bit of fish if luck allowed, perhaps wild greens gathered from the forest edge. The conversation turned to family, to distant villages, to old tales told in the flickering light. Their lives were not lavish. The king's favor flowed downward, enriching nobles and priests, while craftsmen remained near the bottom of the great hierarchy. Yet they found dignity in their skill. Among themselves, the carvers knew who possessed the finest hand, who could coax the subtlest expression from the stone. Young apprentices listened closely, hoping one day to earn such respect. At times, the older men spoke of the temple's beginnings. Some had been here when the first foundation stones were laid, when the jungle was cleared and the first scaffolds rose against the sky. They remembered the years of toil that followed, the endless procession of carts and elephants bringing stone from the quarries, the arrival of new teams of artisans summoned from across the empire. They spoke, too, of those who had been lost. Accidents were common. A slip of the foot on high scaffolds, a block of stone shifting without warning. The work was dangerous, and the empire gave little thought to the fallen. Their families received small offerings, a ritual said for their souls. The work always went on. There were moments of joy as well. When a great panel neared completion, when a figure seemed to come alive beneath the carver's hand, when a master praised a particularly fine detail, the temple rose not through orders alone, but through these quiet triumphs, the shared pride of those who shaped its form. Seasons passed. The monsoon rains swelled the rivers, turning the paths to mud, halting work until the waters receded. In the dry months, dust hung in the air, coating skin and lungs. Through it all, the carvers endured, their tools extensions of their will. For them, the temple was not merely a monument to royal ambition. It was a living work, a creation of many hands and many years. Even now, centuries later, their touch remains. The slender curve of a dancer's arm, the intricate folds of a celestial robe, the quiet smile upon a god's face, all bear witness to their art. Visitors to Angkor walk its galleries, gaze upon its carved walls, and though they may not know the names of the carvers, they see their legacy in every line and form. In the hush of twilight, as the last light fades from the towers, the stone holds its silence. Yet if one listens closely, perhaps the echoes of chisel against stone can still be heard. The faint memory of those who gave shape to one of the world's great wonders. Their work endures, carved into the bones of the earth, a testament to lives spent in devotion to art, to faith, and to the enduring beauty of stone. Chapter 6. Life in the floating villages beyond the stone towers and grand causeways of Angkor. Life on the water followed its own timeless rhythm. Along the vast expanse of the tunnel Sap, the great lake whose waters rose and fell with the seasons, entire communities lived afloat. Their homes rested not on solid ground, but on rafts of timber, lashed together and anchored to the shifting shores. Here, the people of the floating villages carved out a life at the edge of the empire. At dawn, the lake lay calm and glassy, reflecting the pale light of the sky. The air smelled of wet wood, river silt, and fish drying on racks. From the narrow doorways of the houseboats, families stirred. The day began not with the tilling of soil, but with the casting of nets. Fishermen slipped quietly into long, slender boats, their paddles cutting gentle ripples across the still surface. Fishing was not a choice here. It was life itself. The lake's bounty provided food, trade, and modest income. Men, women, even children knew how to mend nets, bait traps, and read the shifting moods of the water. Certain times of year brought abundant schools of fish moving in great silver clouds. Other seasons brought leaner days, when patience and skill mattered most. The floating homes, though humble, were carefully maintained. Built of woven bamboo and planks, they rose and fell with the lake's changing levels. Some families added small gardens and baskets or clay pots, growing herbs and vegetables. Cages for ducks and chickens bobbed nearby, their owners tending them with quiet care. Community life moved in slow currents. Neighbors called greetings from boat to boat. Children paddled small canoes, their laughter carrying across the water. Barges from larger towns arrived with goods, salt, cloth, metal tools traded for dried fish or river prawns. Monks sometimes traveled by boat, stopping to bless homes and accept offerings. Even here, the rhythms of faith remained strong. Yet life in the floating villages was not without hardship. The lake could be unforgiving. Storms swept across the water with little warning, lashing homes and overturning boats. Illness spread quickly in the damp air, and with no fixed land beneath them, the villagers were often beyond the reach of imperial officials. They lived on the margins both of geography and of society. Still, there was a quiet pride among them. They spoke of the lake with reverence, as a living presence. They honored the spirits of the water and the sky, offering rice and flowers at small shrines perched above their doorways. For them, the empire's stone temples were distant things, glimpsed only on rare trips upriver. Their gods lived in the winds, the rains, and the endless ebb and flow of the canal sap. As the sun climbed higher, the surface of the lake shimmered with heat. Nets were drawn, boats unloaded. The work was constant, but so too was the bond with the water. The villagers knew its moods, its secrets, its dangers. Their lives rose and fell with its tides, as surely as the temple bells marked time in Angkor itself. By evening, the lake calmed once more. Cooking fires flickered across the water, their reflections dancing among the boats. Families gathered on the decks of their homes, sharing simple meals beneath the stars. The soft sounds of conversation and the creak of wooden planks filled the night. In this world of floating lives, the day ended as it began, in harmony with the water, with the ever-changing pulse of the great lake, a life apart from the empire's stone and gold, yet no less rich in its own quiet way. Chapter 6. Life in the floating villages. When the monsoon rains arrived, the lake transformed. What had been broad but contained now spread outward, swallowing forests and fields, reshaping the landscape itself. The villagers adapted with ease. Their homes, tethered by long ropes or anchored with poles, drifted with the rising waters. Pathways of yesterday vanished beneath the waves, new channels opening in their place. The villagers read the signs of the currents as others might follow a map. With the floods came abundance. Fish migrated upstream, fat with the bounty of the swollen rivers. The air was alive with the slap of oars, the calls of fishermen hauling in heavy nets. Canoes moved swiftly between stands of half-submerged trees, their occupants knowing just where to cast their lines. In these months, the lake provided generously. Yet life remained precarious. The water could turn swiftly. Sudden storms descended, driving waves that battered homes and overturned unwary boats. Even the most seasoned fishermen knew to respect the lake's moods. They spoke of spirits that guarded the depths, demanding offerings and care. Neglect could bring misfortune or, worse, death. Illness was another constant threat. The damp air bred fevers. Waterborne sicknesses claimed the young and the old. Without the protections of the city or the temples, the villagers relied on old remedies, herbs gathered from forest edges, and prayers whispered to unseen forces. Monks passing through brought solace, but little medicine. Life here was fragile always. Still, the floating villages endured. Their people moved with the rhythms of the lake, finding joy in simple things. Children learned to paddle before they could walk steadily. Young couples courted beneath the stars, their boats drawn close together in the quiet evenings. Songs drifted across the water, stories of old heroes and the lake's own mysteries shared from one generation to the next. Ties to the empire remained, though distant. Traders arrived with goods from Angkor salt, bronze tools, bright cloth. In return, the lake's bounty flowed outward, dried fish and shrimp packed into woven baskets, carried to the great markets. Taxes were owed, though often loosely collected. The king's power reached even here, but with a lighter touch. The lake itself was the true ruler. In the dry season, when the waters receded, the landscape shifted once more. Homes were hauled closer to the shrinking shores. Floating gardens flourished, rows of green suspended above the retreating water. paths of dry earth reappeared, leading to distant villages and forest temples. Life moved with the seasons, neither rush nor still, a constant cycle. At night, beneath the vast sky, the lake lay quiet. Ripples lapped softly against wooden hulls. The stars reflected on the surface, a second sky shimmering below. In the floating homes, families drifted into sleep, their dreams shaped by the water's slow, eternal pulse. Here, on the margins of the empire, life flowed as it always had. Tied to the lake, to its bounty and its trials, a world apart yet ever connected to the land of stone and kings beyond the horizon. Chapter 7. Angkor's Elephant Handlers. In the great empire of Angkor, few creatures held such power and presence as the elephant. They were the engines of the king's ambition, moving stone for temples, carrying warriors to war, parading through the avenues of Angkor Thom beneath banners of gold. To command such beasts was a skill known to few. The elephant handlers, known as mahouts, lived lives apart, bound by a deep bond with their towering charges. Before first light, while the city still slept, the mahouts began their day. Camped on the edges of Angkor's wide reservoirs or beneath groves of towering trees, they rose to tend the elephants before the heat descended. The scent of wet earth and the soft rustle of palm leaves filled the air. In these quiet moments, man and animal shared a silent understanding. The mahout's life began young, often the son or nephew of a seasoned handler. He would spend his childhood learning the language of the elephants, not words, but sounds, gestures, the subtle cues that shape trust between human and beast. By his teens, he could climb with ease onto the broad back of an elephant, guiding it with voice and touch. The elephants themselves came from the deep forests to the north. Caught young, they were brought to the capital, their training a long and delicate process. A bond of trust was essential. Without it, no amount of force would compel these creatures to obey. The mahout's work was not that of a master and servant, but of partners. Respect and patience shaped the relationship. By day, the elephants labored. In the temple sites, they hauled massive blocks of sandstone, their trunks curling around thick ropes, their weight shifting with practiced care. The great stones of Angkor Wat and Bayon owed much to their strength. In the forests, they cleared paths, uprooting stubborn growth where men could not pass. During festivals and royal processions, they became symbols of majesty, their hides draped in silks and gold, their steps slow and deliberate. For the mahout, each task required vigilance. The elephants, though loyal, were creatures of will. A sudden noise, a strange scent, could trigger alarm. Calming the frightened elephant took skill born of years together. The mahouts knew every mood, every sign, a flick of the ears, a sway of the trunk, the shifting of great feet upon the earth. Their lives were bound to their elephants. They ate beside them, slept near them, cared for every wound or sickness. The bond was lifelong. When an elephant aged or grew weak, the mahout remained at its side, tending to its final days. Stories told of mahouts who refused new mounts after their companion's death, their loyalty unbroken. Yet it was not an easy life. The dangers were constant. A misstep beneath a rolling log, a sudden charge during a hunt. In war, the elephants led the first assault. Their tusks capped in iron, their sides armored with heavy leather. From mahoutas atop their backs, archers loosed arrows. But when panic spread through the ranks, elephants could turn as deadly to friend as to foe. Many mahouts bore the scars of such moments or were lost entirely in the chaos. Still, the role carried honor. Among the common folk, the sight of a mahout astride his mount commanded respect. Children watched in awe as the elephants passed. Monks blessed the animals before great journeys. In a world shaped by stone and human will, the elephants remained creatures of ancient power, their presence a link to the wild heart of the land. As the sun set, the Mahouts led their charges to the water's edge. The elephants bathed in slow, deliberate movements, trunks spraying arcs of cool water. The Mahouts sang softly, familiar tunes passed from one generation to the next. In these moments beneath the softening sky, the burdens of the day faded. Man and elephant, bound by trust, by labor, and by the silent understanding of long companionship. Even in rest, the Mahouts remained close to their elephants. The creatures slept lightly, shifting often, their breathing deep and steady in the warm night air. The Mahouts would settle nearby, sometimes on mats of woven palm, other times simply against the rough flank of their companion. It was a closeness born of necessity and a trust. They could not risk a predator or thief approaching unnoticed. Stories were told among the Mahouts of elephants with particular wisdom, beasts that seemed to understand more than simple commands. Certain elephants would respond to unspoken gestures, moving with uncanny intuition. Others were said to have moods like men joy, sorrow, even jealousy. The Mahouts understood that each animal had its own nature, its own will, and no two could be treated alike. In the quiet hours of the night, older handlers would recount tales of great journeys, of campaigns into distant lands where elephants carried kings to victory. They spoke too of darker time stampedes, treachery, moments when control was lost and chaos ruled. The young listened closely, for every story held a lesson. The bond between Mahout and elephant was not easily broken. Some handlers would refuse separation, even when royal officials demanded a favored mount be assigned to another. Such loyalty was sometimes respected, sometimes punished. Yet the Mahout stood firm, for the bond was personal, deeper than orders or rank. It was said that an elephant mourned the loss of its Mahout as surely as a man might grieve a brother. Their skills extended beyond the saddle. The Mahouts were healers of a kind, tending wounds with poultices of crushed herbs, soothing fevers with cool cloths and whispered prayers. They understood the diet needed to keep an elephant strong, the right mix of grasses, fruits, and minerals. In return, the elephants learned to trust the Mahout's touch, to stand still beneath a soothing voice, to accept care without fear. During festivals, their work changed. The elephants were adorned in bright silks and garlands, their tusks polished, their backs draped with embroidered cloths. The Mahouts led them through the avenues of Angkor Thom, past cheering crowds and the solemn gaze of temple statues. Yet even in these moments of display, the handlers remained vigilant. A sudden noise, the press of the crowd danger could come swiftly. Through the shifting fortunes of the empire, the Mahouts endured. Wars came and went, kings rose and fell. Temples were built and abandoned. But the Mahouts remained, bound to their elephants, their lives measured in steady rhythms of care, trust, and shared labor. In later years, as the great temples faded beneath vines and roots, the elephants outlasted the stone. Even when the kings no longer ruled from Angkor, the bond between man and beast remained. Travelers spoke of solitary Mahouts leading their charges through the ruins, a living link to a vanished world. Tonight, as you drift in thought, imagine the soft footsteps of an elephant upon the forest path, the low murmur of a Mahout's voice, the sway of the beast beneath a starlit sky. In that timeless bond lies a fragment of the Khmer Empire, still echoing through the quiet places of the land. Chapter 8. The Devaraja cult and divine kingship at the heart of the Khmer Empire stood a belief older than any temple, deeper than stone. It was the idea that the king was not merely a ruler of men, but the living embodiment of the divine, chosen to bring order to the world. This was the Devaraja, the God King, a concept that bound together the land, the heavens and the people in a single vision of harmony. The origins of the Devaraja cult stretched back to the earliest kings, shaped by Indian influences and local traditions. Over generations, it evolved into the central pillar of Khmer rule. In the sacred texts, the king was seen as the earthly vessel of Shiva, or sometimes Vishnu, the chosen guardian of Dharma. To serve the king was to serve the gods. To question him was to invite chaos. This belief was not confined to words. It was made manifest in stone and ceremony. Each new king would undergo elaborate rituals, guided by the chief priest of the empire. In a hidden chamber within the state temple, away from the gaze of common folk, the king was anointed, purified, and declared Devaraja. From that moment, he stood apart from ordinary men. The temples themselves reflected this sacred role. Angkor Wat, with its soaring towers, mirrored Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain at the center of the universe. The king's own palace was a smaller echo of this divine order. Every aspect of architecture, ritual, and court life reinforced the idea of the king as a bridge between realms. For the common people, this belief shaped their daily lives. Taxes were paid not simply to a monarch, but as offerings to the god king. The great reservoirs and irrigation works were seen as his divine gifts. Victories in war were proof of his favor with the heavens. Even in hardship, the people looked to the king for cosmic balance. Yet such power carried weight. The king was expected to uphold Ma'at, the order of the world. If famine struck, if the rains failed, whispers would spread. Had the king lost divine favor? Had he failed in his sacred duties? The burden of kingship was heavy, its rewards matched by constant demands. The royal court lived in the shadow of this belief. Nobles vied for position, not simply for wealth, but for proximity to the source of divine power. Priests advised the king on auspicious days, on omens and celestial alignments. Every action, from royal hunts to temple dedications, was imbued with cosmic significance. Even the great statues within the temples reflected this fusion. The faces of the gods often bore the features of the reigning king. In this way, stone and spirit were intertwined. The temples stood not only as places of worship, but as eternal affirmations of the king's divine role. But beneath the grandeur, tensions simmered. The priests guarded their influence fiercely. Factions within the court plotted in shadows. A king who lost the favor of the gods could not long hold the loyalty of men. The belief in Devaraja brought unity, but it also carried the seeds of unrest. As the sun set over the empire, the fires of the temple altars burned bright. Monks chanted beneath the vaulted halls. The king sat upon his throne, a mortal man clad in the mantle of the divine. And all who beheld him saw not just a ruler, but a living god, whose fate was entwined with that of the world itself. Night often deepened the aura of the god king. In the glow of torchlight, with incense rising in fragrant spirals, the boundaries between mortal and divine seemed to blur. Court ceremonies stretched late into the hours before dawn. Priests chanted ancient hymns, their voices echoing in the cavernous halls. The king, seated on a high dais beneath canopies of silk, received offerings from nobles and emissaries. These were not mere acts of governance. Each gift, each word spoken in his presence was a ritual of cosmic significance. The king's well-being reflected the state of the universe. His health, his wisdom, his ability to maintain harmony in the kingdom were signs of the god's favor or displeasure. Even small details, a sudden illness, an unexpected eclipse might be read as omens, debated endlessly by priests and astrologers. For the people of the empire, these beliefs shaped every level of life. The great stone roads that connected the provinces to Angkor were not just for trade and tribute, but sacred arteries linking the realm to its divine center. Annual festivals reaffirmed the king's role as guardian of cosmic order. Massive statues and reliefs depicted him in celestial battles, astride war elephants or enthroned amidst heavenly beings. Yet beneath the rituals lay a fragile balance. The weight of expectation on the king was immense. To falter was to risk both political collapse and cosmic disorder. Kings sought to reinforce their position through grand projects, new temples, expanded reservoirs, lavish ceremonies. Each act declared their divine right anew, yet also fed the hunger of the court and the people for constant proof. In private, some kings no doubt struggled with this burden. Behind the carved facades of the palace, they were still men subject to fear, ambition, doubt. Whispers of dissent sometimes spread among the priesthood or the nobility. If a king showed weakness, rivals would move swiftly. There were times when the Devaraja cult itself became a tool in these struggles. Priests might declare unfavorable omens, undermining the king's authority. Factions could manipulate religious rituals to elevate one heir over another. The cult that bound the empire together could also be wielded to tear it apart. And so the king walked a narrow path, every action steeped in meaning. To rule was not enough. He must embody the divine ideal, projecting stability, wisdom, and cosmic harmony at all times. It was a lonely throne, elevated far above the common man, yet always under the gaze of gods and mortals alike. Centuries later, as the empire waned, the belief in the God King lingered. Even as temples crumbled and jungle roots split stone, the stories of divine rulers persisted. In the minds of the people, the Devaraja lived on, a symbol of lost order and faded glory. And in the quiet halls of Angkor's great temples, where light filters softly through broken ceilings, the faces of those ancient kings remain. Carved in stone, serene and timeless, they still gaze out upon the world they once ruled, their legacy etched into the very bones of the earth. Chapter 9, Women of the Khmer Empire. In the sweeping histories of the Khmer Empire, where kings and warriors dominate the stone reliefs, the lives of women often remain in the background, unspoken but essential. Yet their presence shaped the rhythm of daily life, the flow of trade, the life of the court, and the spiritual fabric of the land. From the markets of Angkor to the royal harem, women moved through a world of expectation and quiet influence. In the villages and towns, most women lived lives tied to the land. They worked alongside their husbands in the rice paddies, their hands skilled in planting and harvesting. In the dry season, when fields lay fallow, they wove baskets, spun thread, and crafted textiles dyed with indigo and saffron. These goods traveled to market, exchanged for spices, pottery, or a rare bolt of imported cloth. The markets of Angkor bustled with female merchants. Women here commanded stalls piled high with fruit, fish, woven mats, and fragrant herbs. They bargained with sharp wit, aware of the value of every coin and the shifting tides of supply. In a society where wealth and trade mattered deeply, these women wielded real, if informal, power. Their voices carried in the market squares, their reputations built over years of careful dealings. In temples, women played vital roles as well. Devout wives and daughters brought offerings of jasmine garlands and bowls of rice, lit lamps beneath the stone feet of gods. Among the priesthood, certain women served as attendants, tending sacred fires, preparing ritual meals, or chanting in ceremonies. They moved with quiet grace through the vaulted halls, their devotion a steady current in the spiritual life of the empire. At the royal court, the lives of noble women unfolded behind gilded screens. Here, daughters of powerful families were trained from childhood in the arts of music, dance, and courtly manners. Their marriages served not merely personal ends, but the forging of alliances between rival houses. A union with the king's bloodline could elevate a family's fortunes for generations. Within the palace, the royal harem was a world apart. It held queens, concubines, and attendants, each ranked according to lineage and favor. Life here was shaped by beauty, grace, and constant vigilance. A whispered word, a misstep in the intricate dance of etiquette, could mean disgrace or exile. Yet, even within this confined world, women shaped the court's inner life. Through soft words and carefully chosen alliances, a favored consort might influence the king's decisions. The birth of a son could shift the balance of power overnight. Behind closed doors, the women of the palace wove a web of subtle influence that reached far beyond the carved walls of their chambers. Outside the palace, dancers and courtesans performed at festivals and feasts. Trained in ancient traditions, their movements told stories of gods and heroes. Their performances both entertainment and sacred art. Though admired, their position was precarious, reliant on the favor of patrons and the shifting tastes of the court. Across the empire, women's roles were varied and complex. They bore children, tended homes, tilled fields, and carried the rhythms of life forward. Their labor, devotion, and wisdom were the quiet foundation upon which the empire rested. Though their names seldom appeared in stone, their presence filled the spaces between the great monuments. As the sun set over Angkor, casting long shadows across the fields and temples, the women of the empire continued their work. In homes and markets, in the halls of the palace, in the dim sanctuaries of the gods, they shaped the unseen heart of Khmer life, steady and enduring as the stones themselves. With the dawn of each new day, the lives of women across the Khmer Empire began anew. In the countryside, the rising sun found them already at work. Beside the rice fields, mothers showed daughters how to bind young shoots, their fingers moving with practiced ease. In the forest, they gathered herbs and fruits, teaching the next generation the secrets of plants used for food, medicine, and ritual. Domestic life demanded skill and patience. Cooking fires were tended carefully, with meals prepared from what the land provided. Fish caught in nearby streams, vegetables from kitchen gardens, rice from recent harvests, all combined to feed families whose lives followed the rhythms of nature. Women preserved what they could for leaner months, their knowledge of storage and preparation honed over years. In the larger towns in the great city of Angkor, women's roles expanded. Noble women oversaw vast households, managing servants and estates. Their letters, written on palm leaf scrolls, conveyed instructions to distant stewards. They kept accounts, directed repairs, and ensured that religious offerings were maintained in family shrines. In these duties, their authority was clear, and their wisdom respected. The bonds between women were strong. Within extended families and villages, they supported one another through childbirth, illness, and loss. During festivals, they gathered in groups, their laughter and songs echoing through the streets. Ceremonial weaving circles created textiles for temples and dowries alike, blending artistry with devotion. Marriage carried great importance. For most, it was arranged, a union of families rather than individuals. Yet within those marriages, women shaped the course of household life. A skilled wife brought honor to her husband, her management of domestic affairs crucial to his status. A clever word at the right moment could influence not only family matters but village disputes and local alliances. The lives of royal women held both privilege and peril. Within the palace walls, the queens and consorts navigated a world of constant scrutiny. Beauty and grace were prized, but wit and caution mattered just as much. They understood that favor could shift swiftly with the king's mood, and that rivals waited in silence for any misstep. Mothers of princes bore special weight. The birth of an heir meant new alliances, new ambitions. A queen mother might find her position strengthened, her voice in council heeded with new respect. Yet with power came risk. Jealousy, intrigue, and the ambitions of others could threaten even the most honored woman. Beyond the court, in the realm of faith, certain women achieved lasting influence. Poetesses composed hymns inscribed in temple walls. Wise women served as spirit mediums, bridging the human and divine. In their prayers and offerings, they shaped the spiritual life of the people, their voices rising in sacred chant beneath the gaze of ancient gods. Though the stone carvings of Angkor show countless apsaras, the celestial dancers frozen in graceful motion, the lives of real women were far richer and more complex than these idealized forms suggest. They wove the unseen fabric of the empire, their strength quiet but unyielding. As the moon rose above the great towers of Angkor, its pale light touching the temples and fields alike, the women of the Khmer Empire closed another day. In whispered prayers, in careful labor, in the laughter of children, they carried forward the heart of a civilization whose stories, though seldom carved in stone, still echo through the land. Chapter 10. The Lost Art of Khmer Warfare. Beyond the tranquil images of stone temples and serene dancers, the Khmer Empire was a realm shaped by conflict. From its earliest days, the empire's rise and survival depended upon military might. Armies marched along the great roads, weapons gleamed beneath the sun, and the clash of war echoed across the land. Yet much of this martial world has faded with time. The art of Khmer warfare, once formidable, now lingers only in fragments. In the early morning, before the heat rose from the earth, soldiers gathered in training grounds outside the city walls, clad in cloth tunics reinforced with leather or bronze. They practiced the use of spears, short swords, and the famous double-curved bows. These bows, crafted from layers of horn, sinew, and wood, could send arrows with great force, their curved shape allowing them to be used on foot or from atop an elephant. War elephants were the pride of the Khmer armies. Heavily armored, their tusks fitted with iron caps, they led charges into enemy lines, breaking formations with sheer power. Mounted atop them, archers and spearmen rained down attacks. The bond between elephant and rider was crucial. Poor handling could turn a mighty weapon into a stampede of chaos. Cavalry played a smaller role. The dense forests and narrow roads of the region favoring infantry and elephants. Foot soldiers advanced with large rectangular shields and spears, moving in close ranks. They were trained to fight in the humid jungles and flooded plains, where mobility mattered more than heavy armor. Siege warfare was an art in itself. Khmer engineers built towering wooden machines to assault enemy walls, using ladders and battery rams to breach defenses. They understood the power of water, two diverting rivers to flood enemy positions or starve out fortified cities. The empire's mastery of hydraulic engineering served both peace and war. At the head of the army rode the king or his chosen general, surrounded by nobles in ornate armor, their banners trailing behind. Victories were celebrated with grand processions through Angkor Thom, captured weapons and prisoners displayed for all to see. The spoils of war enriched the temples, their treasure rooms filled with offerings taken from distant lands. But the life of a soldier was harsh. Campaigns meant months away from home, long marches through treacherous terrain. Disease claimed many before battle ever began. Supplies were limited, and the jungle itself was an unrelenting foe leeches. Fever and venomous creatures waited at every turn. The enemies of the empire were formidable. To the west, the growing power of Ayutthaya posed a constant threat. To the east, the kingdoms of Kampa harried Khmer borders with swift naval raids. The Khmer army adapted, learning to fight on land and water alike. But The pressure of near-constant conflict strained the empire's resources. Weapons were crafted with skill. Blacksmiths forged iron blades, spearheads, and arrow points in village forges and royal workshops. Warriors prized their weapons, often adorning them with carvings or inlays of silver. The finest arms were blessed by priests before battle, thought to carry the favor of the gods. As dawn faded into day, the clang of weapons filled the air. Drill masters barked commands. New recruits learned to move as one, to trust the man beside them, to strike swiftly and without hesitation. In this world, discipline meant survival. Yet beneath the training, there was an understanding. To fight for the empire was to risk everything. Glory awaited the victors, but death or disfigurement shadowed each campaign. And even for those who returned, the scars of war often lingered long after the banners were furled. As the sun reached its zenith, soldiers took brief respite beneath the sparse shade of trees or canvas awnings. Meals were simple rice, dried fish, a handful of fruits. The talk among men was of tactics, of remembered battles, of comrades lost and enemies yet to be faced. The life of a soldier was one of constant preparation. Peace was fleeting, and new conflicts always loomed. The generals of the Khmer Empire were men of both battlefield skill and political cunning. To rise through the ranks required loyalty to the king, success in war, and careful navigation of the court's rivalries. A general's favor could rise swiftly with victory, yet disappear just as fast with a failed campaign. The court's memory was long, and ambition was not easily forgotten. In the dry season, when roads were passable and rivers low, great armies moved out from Angkor. Long columns of infantry, accompanied by elephants and ox-drawn carts, wound their way through forest paths. The clatter of weapons, the calls of handlers, the rumble of wheels echoed through the land. Villagers watched their passing in awe and fear, knowing that war brought both glory and hardship. Crossing rivers posed challenges. Engineers built temporary bridges of wood and rope, their structures swaying with each step of man and beast. Where the enemy held the banks, archers would fire volleys to cover the advance. On open plains, elephants led the way, their massive forms breaking enemy lines. Infantry followed close behind, spears bristling, banners fluttering high. Combat was brutal and swift. In the dense jungles, visibility was low, and ambushes common. Skirmishes often began with a sudden clash of blades or a hail of arrows from unseen foes. Discipline held the Khmer ranks together. Shouts of commanders rose above the din, urging their men to hold fast. Victory belonged to those who could adapt to the chaos of battle. In defeat, the cost was heavy. Fallen soldiers were often left where they lay, claimed by the forest. Survivors limped home, wounds festering, memories of blood and fire haunting their dreams. Success brought reward land, titles, gold, but also the envy of rivals. A hero today could be a target tomorrow. Weapons and armor from distant lands sometimes found their way into Khmer hands. Chinese steel, Indian war elephants, Kampa naval tactics, all influenced the evolving art of war. The empire was not isolated. It absorbed what it could, reshaping foreign ideas to suit its needs. Yet, over time, cracks appeared. The old methods, once unmatched, faced new threats. Enemy kingdoms grew stronger, adopting new weapons, new strategies. The Khmer army, tied to ancient traditions, struggled to keep pace. Victories became harder won, defeats more frequent. The strain on the empire deepened. In the twilight of Khmer power, war remained constant. Border raids, shifting alliances, and internal rebellions sapped the strength of the army. The once proud ranks grew thinner. Resources stretched, morale waned. And as the great temples faded beneath creeping vines, so too did the martial glory of the empire. Yet echoes of that lost art remain. In carvings that line the galleries of Angkor Wat, warriors still march in perfect formation, their faces calm and resolute. Elephants charge across stone panels, their riders poised with spear and bow. The stories of those long-forgotten battles are etched in the very heart of the empire, silent witnesses to a world where war once shaped the fate of kings. Chapter 11. The jungles return when the Khmer Empire was at its height. Angkor was a place of order. Canals and reservoirs shaped the flow of water. Causeways and bridges connected the capital to distant provinces, and vast temples rose above cleared land. The jungle, though ever near, was kept at bay by the ceaseless labor of men. But empires fade. And with time the jungle returned. The first signs were subtle. Along the edges of rice paddies, weeds grew thicker. Small saplings took root in cracks along stone walkways. After a particularly heavy monsoon, the water's edge crept further inland, leaving behind silt and tangled growth. At first, the people cleared what they could. Farmers worked harder to maintain their fields. Monks organized efforts to sweep temple grounds. But the forces of nature moved with quiet persistence. Without the full strength of the empire to maintain it, the great hydraulic system began to falter. Canals silted up. Dikes crumbled. Water no longer flowed where it should. During floods, new channels cut through the land. In dry seasons, once fertile fields lay parched and cracked. The balance between land and water, once carefully maintained, slipped away. As the countryside struggled, so too did the city. Craftsmen abandoned their workshops. Markets thinned. The royal court grew smaller, courtiers and nobles drifting to other centers of power. In their absence, the jungle pressed in. Vines crept along palace walls. Fig trees, with roots as thick as a man's leg, anchored themselves in stone. The temples were not spared. Along the outer galleries, moss spread in rich green layers. Water seeped through the roofs, loosening tiles and mortar. Where walls cracked, seedlings found purchase, their roots widening every breach. Birds nested in forgotten chambers. Monkeys swung from fallen lintels, their calls echoing through halls once filled with sacred chants. Travelers from distant lands began to speak of Angkor as a place half surrendered to the forest. The great causeways lay broken. The stone gates, once guarded by statues of gods and demons, were draped in vines. In the dry season, paths could still be found, but in the rains, the jungle swallowed all. For those who remained monks, farmers, scattered villagers' life adapted to this new reality. Paths were cleared with machetes each morning. Shrines were tended with care, though the battle against encroaching roots was constant. Rituals continued beneath collapsed roofs, incense burning amidst the scent of damp earth and decay. Some spoke of spirits stirring in the overgrown ruins. It was said that the gods themselves, once honored with grand ceremonies, now wandered the vine-choked halls. Offerings were left at hidden altars. Prayers grew quieter, more cautious, as though the forest itself listened, and the jungle grew bolder. Birds and insects filled the air with unfamiliar sounds. Great trees split ancient walls, their trunks twisting through the heart of temples. What had taken generations of human effort to build was slowly undone by wind, rain, and root. Yet amidst the decay, beauty remained. Morning light filtering through leaves painted shifting patterns on stone. The scent of orchids mixed with that of old incense. Water dripped softly into hidden pools. The ruins breathed with a life of their own. A world where nature and memory intertwined. Seasons passed. Monsoon rains came and went. Each year the jungle claimed a little more. Once wide roads shrank to narrow paths. The bridges sagged beneath creeping vines. The grand towers of Angkor Wat, still visible above the canopy, stood like islands in a sea of green. Travelers who ventured too far without guides often found themselves lost among the tangled growth. Those who lived in the shadow of the ruins learned the ways of this new landscape. They followed old canal beds now overgrown with reeds, marked trees with carved symbols, and remembered which parts of the forest were safe and which held dangers unseen. Hunters moved quietly through the underbrush, their senses sharp, for not all creatures welcomed human presence. Legends grew around the abandoned halls. Some spoke of stone guardians that moved beneath the moonlight. Others whispered of forgotten treasures hidden beneath root and rubble, guarded by spirits of the old kings. Such tales kept many away, yet curiosity always drew a few. Monks seeking solitude, fortune hunters, or simply those who wished to stand amidst the echoes of the past. Nature, indifferent to human longing, continued its slow work. The roots of fig and banyan trees pressed deeper into the stone. Rainwater, seeping through cracks, widened them further. In some places, entire walls gave way, collapsing into heaps of moss-covered blocks. Small pools formed in the hollows, home to frogs and dragonflies. Life, in its endless cycle, thrived in the ruins. Yet amidst this quiet reclaiming, some threads of the old world endured. Pilgrims still came, drawn by stories of the sacred. They lit incense before weathered statues, their prayers rising into the still air. Monks tended a few surviving shrines, their chants echoing faintly through vine-draped corridors. In these moments, the line between past and present blurred. From distant regions, foreign travelers began to hear of Angkor. Tales of a lost city swallowed by the jungle spread beyond the empire's former borders. Some came in search of knowledge, others for adventure. They returned with stories of vast temples wrapped in green, of faces carved in stone staring serenely through curtains of leaves. But for the people who lived nearby, the ruins were not merely a curiosity. They were part of the land itself, woven into daily life. Children played among fallen pillars, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Farmers worked fields where royal processions once passed. The empire's glory was gone, but its bones remained, embraced by the forest. As twilight fell, the jungle grew still. The last calls of birds faded into silence. Bats flitted through darkening halls. In the quiet, the ancient stones seemed to breathe, their surfaces cool beneath creeping moss. The faces carved into temple walls watched with timeless patience, bearing witness to the passing of years. And so the jungle returned, not in a single moment, but in the slow, relentless way of nature. What men had built, the earth now held in its gentle, unyielding embrace. In this place of stone and green, the echoes of the Khmer Empire remained, softened by time, sheltered beneath a living canopy. Chapter 12. A Pilgrim's Journey to Angkor Wat. Far beyond the shadow of Angkor's towers, in distant villages scattered across the forests and floodplains, tales of the great temple endured. Even as the empire waned, the faithful still spoke of Angkor Wat as the holiest of places where the gods dwelled and the sacred mountain rose from the earth. To set out on pilgrimage to this place was an act of devotion, a journey of many days, often weeks, across a land both beautiful and treacherous. Pilgrims prepared carefully. Offerings were gathered, jasmine garlands, fragrant incense, small statues of bronze or clay. Food was packed, simple and lasting. Dried fish, salted meats, pressed rice cakes. Prayers were said before household altars, seeking safe passage. The journey would not be easy. At first light, with the mist still rising from the fields, the pilgrim would begin. Alone or in small groups, they followed narrow paths through forests, along river banks, across the levees of ancient canals. The road was seldom straight. Fallen trees blocked the way. Streams swollen by recent rains forced detours. Insects hummed in the heavy air. Every step required patience. Along the way, the pilgrims might stop at smaller shrines, places where village monks tended fading statues or simple altars of stone. Here they rested, shared news of the road ahead, and offered thanks for safe travel thus far. In these encounters, a network of faith and fellowship sustained them. The journey was not only a test of endurance, but a pilgrimage of the heart. Wild animals were a constant threat. Tigers and leopards roamed the deeper forests, their presence signaled by broken branches or the distant alarm calls of birds. Bandits, too, haunted the less traveled routes, preying on those who traveled alone. Pilgrims learned to move cautiously, to trust the wisdom of local guides when they could be found. Crossing rivers posed another challenge. Ferries were rare, and the shifting currents treacherous. Pilgrims often fashioned rafts from bamboo, binding them with vines. They prayed before each crossing, knowing that the spirits of the water demanded respect. Even the bravest tread carefully near such places. As days turned to weeks, the pilgrim's body grew lean, the feet hardened by the miles. Nights were spent beneath makeshift shelters, with fires burning low to ward off the dark. The sounds of the forest became familiar, a chorus of frogs, the rustle of unseen creatures, the sighing of wind through ancient trees. In this solitude, reflection deepened. The journey itself became a form of prayer. Those who traveled in groups shared stories around the fire. Tales of kings long past, of miracles performed at Angkor, of visions granted to the faithful. Such stories sustained weary spirits, reminding them of the temple that awaited at the journey's end. For many, the hope of simply setting eyes upon Angkor Wat was worth every hardship. And then, after long days of travel, the first glimpse would come. A distant silhouette rising above the treetops. The unmistakable spires of Angkor Wat. For the pilgrim, that moment brought a rush of emotion relief, awe, humility. The great journey neared its close, yet much remained to be done. The approach to the temple was not swift. Pilgrims moved slowly now, savoring each step. They washed themselves in the waters of the ancient moats, donned clean garments, and prepared their offerings. Their hearts beat with quiet reverence. At last, standing before the great causeway of Angkor Wat, the pilgrim would pause. The vast moat reflected the towering spires, their forms softened by mist and morning light. The scale of the temple overwhelmed the senses. No story, no carving, no word passed from elder to child could prepare one for the sight of it. Crossing the wide stone bridge, feet moving slowly across worn flagstones, the pilgrim joined a steady procession of others. Farmers from distant provinces, merchants seeking blessings for trade, monks in saffron robes, all drawn by the same devotion. Though strangers in life, they were now bound together by the sacred purpose of the journey. At the entrance, incense burned in great brass urns. The air was thick with its scent. Pilgrims knelt, heads bowed, offering thanks for safe passage. Some wept softly, overcome by the emotion of the moment. Others gazed upward, eyes tracing the soaring towers, the intricate carvings of gods and celestial dancers that adorned every surface. Inside the temple, the path spiraled inward, deeper toward the heart of the sacred space. Each gallery held stories carved in stone battles of ancient kings. The turning of the cosmic ocean, the endless dance of creation and destruction. The pilgrim moved slowly, fingers brushing against cool stone, pausing often in silent contemplation. In the inner sanctum, where few words were spoken, the air grew still. Here, beneath the towering central spire, the most sacred images stood. Pilgrims offered garlands of flowers, bowls of rice, coins of little worth but great meaning. Monks chanted softly, their voices rising and falling like the breath of the temple itself. The journey's end was not marked by grand gestures. For many, it was a moment of quiet reflection. To stand in that space, beneath centuries of stone and belief, was enough. The hardships of the road, the dangers faced, the doubts along the way all faded in the presence of the sacred. The pilgrim's heart was lightened, the spirit renewed. Yet no journey truly ends at its destination. The path home awaited. Some pilgrims lingered for days, sleeping in the shadow of the great walls, rising at dawn to offer prayers once more. Others set out quickly, their minds already turning to miles ahead, to the fields and families left behind. On the return journey, the burdens felt lighter. The forest seemed less dark, the rivers less wide. The pilgrim carried more than memories. The journey had changed them. They returned with stories to tell, blessings to share, and a deeper connection to the world of gods and men. In villages far from Angkor, the tales spread anew. By the warmth of evening fires, children listened wide-eyed as the pilgrim spoke of towering spires, of carvings that seemed to live, of the hush that filled the inner sanctum. And so the cycle continued, each new generation dreaming of the road to Angkor Wat, of the journey that bound the faithful across the vast heart of the Khmer Empire. Chapter 13. The Curse of the Sacred Pools. Scattered throughout the vast temple complexes of Angkor, hidden between moss-covered walls and shaded by ancient trees, lay pools of still water. Some were simple wells, cut deep into the earth to quench the thirst of pilgrims and priests. Others were vast, carefully constructed basins, their stone edges worn smooth by countless hands. These were the sacred pools, places of ritual, reflection, and, in time, whispered fear. In the early days of the empire, water held great significance. It was life itself, channeled through canals to feed the fields, stored in great berries to sustain the people through dry seasons. In the temples, water became more than sustenance. It was a medium between worlds, used to cleanse the body and spirit before approaching the gods. Priests drew water from sacred pools to purify altars, to anoint the faithful, to bless offerings. These rituals were carried out with great care. Certain pools were reserved for high ceremonies, their use restricted to the priesthood. Others were open to pilgrims who came to wash away sins, to seek healing, or to honor departed ancestors. The air around these pools hung heavy with incense, the water's surface often covered with drifting petals and offerings of fruit or rice. But as the empire's fortunes waned, the pools changed. Without the labor of countless workers to maintain the great reservoirs and canals, water stagnated. The flow that had once kept it clear and sweet slowed to a trickle. Insects gathered on the still surface. Algae spread in green veils. The once pure water turned foul. With this decline came whispers. Illness began to follow those who drank from the pools. Skin broke out in sores. Fevers racked the body. The priests, once quick to explain such matters through balance and ritual, grew silent. Among the common people, stories took root. They spoke of a curse, the anger of the gods for forgotten rites or broken promises. The pools, once places of healing, became feared. Even in the royal court, unease spread. Some blamed foreign invaders, others corrupt officials or the king's own failings. Still, the sickness grew. In temples long abandoned to the jungle, pools lay hidden beneath thick vines. Travelers stumbled upon them by chance, only to flee at the sight of dark waters and the eerie quiet that surrounded them. Priests attempted to cleanse the pools through new rituals. They cast offerings into the depths, recited ancient hymns, called upon unseen forces to lift the curse. For a time the waters would clear, but always the stagnation returned. Fear deepened. Among villagers near the ruins, stories passed from elder to child. They spoke of spirits trapped beneath the waters, of sacrifices once made to keep them at peace. Some claimed to hear voices at night, rising from the depths. Others avoided the pools entirely, building shrines at a distance to placate whatever forces might dwell there. In time, many of the pools were sealed or left to the forest. Only the bravest ventured near, and then only to leave offerings of rice, flowers, or coins. The curse had become part of the land's memory, as enduring as the stone towers themselves. Yet for those who listened closely, the pools still whispered. In the cool silence beneath the canopy, beneath the hum of insects and the rustle of leaves, the old stories lived on. The sacred pools, once clear and life-giving, now held shadows and secrets, reflections of a world long past. In the decades that followed the fall of Angkor, the jungle crept further into the heart of the temples. The great stone causeways broke beneath shifting roots. Galleries collapsed beneath the weight of tangled vines. Amidst this slow reclaiming, the sacred pools remained, some choked with debris, others eerily clear. Reflecting the surrounding ruins in still, dark water, for those who now lived on the margins of the empire, these pools were no longer places of ritual but of fear. The older villagers warned that to approach them carelessly was to invite misfortune. They spoke of ancient pacts made between the priests of old and unseen forces, pacts now broken. Without the proper rites, without the power of the God King to maintain balance, these places had become thresholds between worlds. Travelers who wandered too near sometimes returned changed, their eyes dull, their speech halting. Some claimed to have seen figures beneath the water shadows of monks long dead, or perhaps older things shaped by no human hand. There were whispers of voices that called out in the night, rising from the depths when the moon was full. Whether these were tricks of the mind or echoes of deeper truths, none could say for certain. Among the remaining monks, few dared to cleanse the old pools. They spoke of a heaviness in the air, a sensation of unseen eyes watching from beneath the surface. The bravest would approach with offerings of rice and lotus flowers, chanting softly, but even they would not linger. The ancient chants, once spoken with strength, were now delivered with caution, as if words alone might stir what slept below. In time, certain pools gained names of ill omen. The pool of sighs, where it was said the wind never stirred. The mirror of lost faces, where those who gazed too long risked madness. The still eye, whose surface never rippled, not even in storm or wind. Such places drew only the desperate or the foolish, and many of those who sought them were never seen again. Stories spread beyond the local villages. Merchants carried tales of cursed waters to distant markets. Scribes recorded strange happenings in fragile scrolls, their writings careful not to invite the attention of darker forces. In this way, the legend of the cursed pools became part of the broader memory of the Khmer lands, a warning passed from mouth to ear, from elder to child. For the people who remained, daily life adapted to the presence of these haunted places. Children were forbidden to play near the pools. Hunters left small tokens, grains of rice, strands of hair before crossing ground believed to be watched. During the great festivals, processions carefully avoided routes that led too close to the abandoned basins. Even the most joyous occasions were tempered by this lingering fear. Yet not all avoided the pools. In times of great need, when illness struck or crops failed, the desperate still sought their power. Offerings were made in secret animal blood, poured into the water, whispered pleas for aid sent to the depths. The old belief in the pool's sacred power had not entirely vanished. It had twisted, darkened, becoming something both fearful and revered. There were stories, too, of lone figures seen at the pools in the deep hours of the night, figures clad in faded robes, faces hidden beneath hoods. No one knew whether these were wandering monks, madmen, or something older still. Those who caught glimpses did not speak of what they saw. Silence was safer. Seasons passed. The pools deepened with silt, their stones worn smooth by rain and time. The jungle pressed closer, vines trailing into the water. Animals drank cautiously, if at all. The birds grew quiet near these places. In the cool shadows beneath towering trees, the pools remained, waiting. And so, even as the rest of Angkor faded into ruin, the curse of the sacred pools endured. They stood as reminders of the empire's forgotten glories and of the delicate balance between the seen and unseen worlds. To this day, those who walk the ancient paths speak in hushed tones of these waters. For beneath the still surface, in depths untouched by light, the old curses remain, echoing through the silence of stone and shadow. Chapter 14. Angkor. After the Fall. In the centuries that followed the slow unraveling of the Khmer Empire, the stones of Angkor remained. The kings and courtiers, the artisans and builders, the warriors and farmers, all were gone. Yet the great towers still rose above the forest, their carved faces gazing serenely through the shifting canopy. The jungle thickened, paths vanished, canals filled with silt, but Angkor was never truly lost. For the people of the land, the ruins were not abandoned. Though the royal court had moved, though the great processions no longer crossed the causeways, life continued around the fallen capital. Small villages grew near the edges of the old city. Farmers planted rice in fields fed by ancient canals. Monks kept lonely vigils in crumbling shrines, their chants echoing faintly through vine-draped halls. Stories of the old kings lived on in song and tale. Around hearth fires, elders spoke of a time when Angkor's towers touched the heavens, when elephants filled the royal roads, when kings ruled with the favor of the gods. These tales, softened by time, mingled history with myth, blurring the line between what had been and what was now imagined. The great temples remained a place of pilgrimage. Though many had fallen into shadow, Angkor Wat endured as a living sanctuary. Pilgrims came from distant provinces, offering incense and prayers. They marveled at the carvings, the scale, the silence of the stone. For them, the temple was not merely a ruin, but a sacred place where the past and present met. Yet beneath the reverence lay a quiet sadness. The empire was no more. The mighty canals lay broken. The forests reclaimed the roads. The splendor of Angkor, once unmatched, had faded into memory. The people who now lived in its shadow carried on with simple lives, tied to the land, their world smaller but no less rich in meaning. For the monks, each day was a thread in the fabric of time. They rose before dawn, their voices joining in ancient chants. They swept the temple floors, repaired what they could, tended small gardens and courtyards where once kings had walked. Their devotion was steady, unshaken by the crumbling walls around them. In their prayers, the glory of Angkor remained alive. Wanderers sometimes came traders, scholars, the curious few who heard whispers of a lost city in the jungle. They would stand in awe before the great towers, tracing the worn carvings with their fingers. Some took sketches, others simply gazed in silence. All felt the weight of the past in that place, the echo of countless lives that had once filled its streets and halls. Nature, too, paid no heed to history. Each year, roots thickened, stones shifted, monsoon rains battered the walls. Birds and insects made their homes in niches carved by human hands. The jungle breathed around the ruins a living force that neither revered nor destroyed, but simply reclaimed. Yet through it all, the people remained. In the small villages, life followed the old rhythms. Rice planted and harvested, festivals held to honor the gods. Children grew up hearing the stories of Angkor, their imaginations filled with visions of lost kings and hidden treasures. The ruins were part of their world, a constant presence on the edge of daily life. And so, after the fall, Angkor endured not as an empire of stone and power, but as a place of memory, of spirit, of quiet persistence. In the hush of dawn, when the mist drifted through the towers, when the first rays of sunlight caught the carvings, the old magic still lingered. The past was not gone. It lived, in stone and story, in the hearts of those who still walked beneath Angkor's ancient shadow. As the years became decades and decades turned into centuries, the world beyond Angkor changed. New kingdoms rose and fell across Southeast Asia. Foreign ships began to appear along distant coasts, their sails bright against the sea. Yet in the forests of the old Khmer heartland, the great city remained, silent, enduring, wrapped in green. From time to time, distant rulers sent expeditions to explore the ruins. Their envoys returned with tales of towering spires and vast stone galleries, of a city once fit for gods now slumbering beneath vines and roots. Such stories traveled far, stirring the curiosity of scholars and adventurers. Yet few ventured deep into the jungle. The path was long, the risks many, and the shadow of ancient powers seemed to linger still. For the villagers and monks who lived nearby, the ruins were simply part of life. They drew water from the ancient berries, tended fields where royal soldiers once marched. Their festivals wove old and new together, honoring both village spirits and the distant memory of god kings. Children played among toppled statues, their laughter ringing through galleries where courtiers had once gathered. The past was not a distant thing. It lived beside them in stone and story, in the shapes of the land itself. With each passing season, the jungle pressed closer. Some temples vanished entirely beneath thick canopies, their towers hidden from all but the most determined seeker. Others, like Angkor Wat, remained visible, cared for by small bands of devoted monks. There, beneath weathered carvings and cracked lintels, the sacred flame still burned. Pilgrims continued to arrive, their journeys long and uncertain. They brought offerings of fruit, flowers, and incense, kneeling before statues whose features had softened with time. For them, the ruins were more than history. They were a bridge to something greater, a glimpse of a world where mortals had touched the divine. Foreign visitors grew more frequent in later centuries. Some came as traders, others as explorers, drawn by the allure of a lost civilization. They marveled at the artistry of the carvings, the scale of the temples. Some took fragments home, small stones or bits of sculpture, seeking to capture a piece of Angkor's faded glory. But the true essence of the place could not be carried away. It lived in the air, in the light that played across moss-covered walls, in the silence that filled the grand halls. For those who remained, the ruins were not a curiosity, but a presence, a reminder of what had been and of what endured. Life moved slowly in the shadow of the temples. Fields were planted, children born, elders passed on their knowledge. The rhythm of the land continued, shaped by sun and rain, by the slow breath of the forest. At dawn, the first light would catch the spires of Angkor Wat, turning the stone gold and crimson. Birds stirred in the treetops, their calls echoing through the still air. In those moments, time seemed to fold upon itself. The days of kings and warriors, of builders and dancers, felt close, as if they might yet return. And perhaps in some way they never truly left. The spirit of Angkor lived on in the stories, told by elders, in the quiet devotion of monks. In the footsteps of pilgrims who still came seeking wisdom or peace, the city had fallen, but it had not disappeared. Today, those who walk its ancient paths feel this enduring presence. Beneath the towering trees, along worn stone corridors, in the reflection of still waters, Angkor remains. A place of beauty and burden, of triumph and loss. A testament to the power of human vision and to the greater forces of time and nature that shape all things. So ends our journey tonight through the rise and fall of the Khmer Empire. Let your mind drift now, carried by the soft breath of forest, the murmur of distant waters, the enduring silence of stone. The past is always with us, woven into the world we know. Rest well beneath the shadow of Angkor's ancient towers. You have now traveled through the heart of the Khmer Empire, across the sun-baked rice fields, beneath the towering spires of Angkor, through hidden chambers and forgotten halls. You have walked the winding roads taken by pilgrims, stood beside the sacred pools, heard the whispers of ancient monks, and felt the slow return of the jungle. You have glimpsed the beauty and burden of life beneath Angkor's shadow. As the centuries passed, so too did the empire. The kings and courtiers faded into memory, their banners lowered, their voices stilled. The temples remained, standing against time and nature alike, their stones softened by rain and root, their carvings still speaking to those who know how to listen. The jungle, once held back by the will of men, now breathes through every crack and crevice, its green embrace a gentle reclaiming. But Angkor was never truly abandoned. The people remained farmers, tending fields watered by ancient canals, monks chanting beneath vine-draped arches, children playing in the shadows of stone. The rhythm of life endured, humble and steadfast, beneath the watchful gaze of forgotten kings. For those who journey there today, Angkor offers more than history. It offers reflection, a chance to stand among the ruins of a once mighty civilization and feel the passing of time. To walk where others once walked, to touch stone carved by long-gone hands, to hear in the rustle of leaves and the hush of dawn the echo of lives long past. It is a place where the human and the natural meet, where beauty and decay walk side by side, where silence speaks of triumphs and losses, of dreams carved in stone and stories whispered through generations. The empire may have fallen, but its spirit lingers still, woven into the land, into the hearts of those who remember. As you rest now, let your thoughts drift through the forest of Angkor. Picture the still pools beneath towering trees, the slow breath of the earth, the faint scent of incense in the morning air. Let the quiet rhythms of that ancient world guide you gently into sleep, where time flows soft and unhurried. For in the depths of night, beneath the stars, Angkor endures. A place of stone and story, of memory and mystery. A testament to what was, and to what remains. And in your dreams, may you walk its paths once more, beneath the endless sky. Thank you for joining us on this quiet journey through the lost world of Angkor. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to subscribe to the channel for more calming explorations of the past. Until next time, rest well and sleep peacefully.